At the start of this season, Precious Achiuwa was expected to be a vital part of the Raptors and their potential success for this season. So, how do we get to the point where late on in the season, Achiuwa is getting completely benched by Nick Nurse? Let's get into it. Raptors fans had very high expectations for Precious Achiuwa going into the season, and there were some high expectations exactly to what he could achieve in his Raptors career and his NBA career. As a very young player, he was excellent in the second half of last season, more specifically after the All-Star break, where he emerged as a completely different player, showcasing a different level of confidence that we had not seen, a different level of shooting and decision-making that we had not seen. And he was influential in the Raptors winning 48 games and even winning 2 playoff games as well, because maybe where he shined the most with the Raptors was in the playoffs, where he was going toe-to-toe with Joel Embiid and doing so extremely successfully. Like, I will never forget that Game 5 in Philly, where the Raptors, on consecutive possessions, possession after possession, gave Achiuwa the ball, and he absolutely went after Joel Embiid, got by him, and scored every time. And I refuse to believe that a player who was so talented that he could do that and shoot 35% from 3 and can be a significant contributor to our defense, I refuse to believe that that player can no longer exist, and we're left with what we have right now, which is a player who Nick Nurse is sending a message to by benching him completely against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I'll explain to you in a second as to why this is Nick Nurse wanting to send a message, purposely leaving on the bench for the entirety of this resounding win for the Raptors. But if you don't know me, my name is Jacob. I run this channel, Amateur Hour Sports. It's dedicated to giving you guys Toronto Raptors NBA content. I do it in videos like this, live stream watch parties for Raptors games, and I've also added a ton of YouTube Shorts content recently. So if you like what you see from today's video, drop a like to show your support, and make sure you subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with this content, and you can help me on my road to 14,000 subscribers. The Raptors won this game in resounding fashion yesterday against the Thunder. It ended 128 to 111, but it was a pretty close game for the first 3 quarters. The fourth quarter was anything but. It's kind of rare these days for the Raptors to be in such an advantageous situation that they have the luxury of going to garbage time and getting some additional minutes to players who would not normally see any sort of NBA action, given how the Raptors have played this season, given their abilities on the court. But yesterday, the Raptors were in that spot, and late in the game, they went to Joe Wieskamp and Malachi Flynn, 2 guys who have just not played an extended run here for a variety of different reasons as it comes to their talent levels and what the Raptors are trying to achieve at the moment. One player who did not enter the game in this spot is Precious Achiuwa. Achiuwa, in fact, did not play at all in this game, and for the first time in his Raptors career, he did not play a game because of a coach's decision. And even though if you go through the extensive statistics of his Raptors career, if you go through the transcript of every game he's played for the Raptors, technically December 28th, 2021, he was listed as a player who did not play. But this was a weird game where the Raptors were coming back from that 45-point loss to the Cavaliers, where they were missing their entire team through health and safety protocols. And in this game against the 76ers, well, even Daniel Oturu, if you remember him, played for the Raptors. So I imagine a lot more went into the decision to not play Achiuwa, a lot more than just Nick Nurse's coaching decision in terms of the player and their abilities on the court. But this one in particular against the Thunder certainly was exactly that. Nurse deciding the Raptors could not go forward with Precious Achiuwa being on the floor. The Raptors finding success on the floor largely meant that Achiuwa could not be there. And in a lot of recent games, whenever Achiuwa has stepped on the floor, he's been a black hole pit defensively. And finally, Nick Nurse has had the balls to completely bench him for a game. Even when the Raptors were in garbage time, even when the Raptors were leading by 20 points late on in this game, Nurse wanted to send that message to the player. And going back to that Cleveland game where we lost by 45 points, there are certain games in a player's NBA career which can completely reshape their trajectory and what they can achieve. Chris Boucher cites that Cleveland game as one that changed his career. That was the game where he understood that he needed to be a player that always brought insanely high levels of energy in order to be a successful NBA player and contribute to an NBA team. There's also been some DNPs along the way for Boucher as well, which certainly are some wake-up calls. And though, I have my qualms with Chris Boucher's game, I think we can say at this point, he's a consistent contributor and an important part of the Raptors bench. Though a struggling bench, he's an important part of it, and yesterday was a good example of him making a positive impact for the team. So I'm very much hoping for Achiuwa. This one can sort of be that wake-up call for him, but how did we get here? Last season, Achiuwa was showing some very big strides after the All-Star break. At the start of the season, there were some struggles with his decision-making and some struggles all over the court. But from the All-Star game onward, where he was named a Rising Star, and he played in the Rising Stars game and actually looked quite good in the Rising Stars game, I might add. From that point onward, he was a significant part of the Raptors' defense. He was hitting three-pointers, in fact, shooting 36% from three on the season, which included the really rough start to the season from shooting. He had an excellent season and was showcasing some real positive sort of notions that he can be a knockdown shooter in the NBA. That, coupled with the fact that he was getting to the rim and scoring very well, we were expecting growth. But this season, it's largely flatlined in a lot of statistical categories. The points per game has stayed relatively the same, even though the field goal percentage has grown a bit. The most concerning parts of Achiuwa's game are the three-point percentage, first of all, which has gone from 36% all the way down to under 25% in those areas. That, coupled with the fact that Achiuwa, like I said earlier, is just a complete black hole on defense. The reality is in the modern NBA that if you play defense, you're going to play NBA minutes, especially for a team run by Nick Nurse, who is very defensively driven. I'll go further on this point here. Despite the fact that we're in the most offensive era, perhaps ever, in NBA history, there are examples of players who play defense, who have no offensive game, and still stay on the floor. PJ Tucker can go 5 games without scoring a single point for the 76ers, but in that stretch, he could have the highest plus-minus. The Cleveland Cavaliers still start Isaac Okoro, even though you don't need to give him any sort of respect when you're on defense because he has no offensive game whatsoever, but he can play defense. Now, obviously, the Cavaliers need to improve on that, but he can play defense, therefore he has an NBA role for himself. Now, I'm not saying Achiuwa is one of these guys who can't play offense whatsoever, though maybe some recent games have suggested that aspect. Defensively, Nurse has talked about in a recent press conference that perhaps he can be better serviced using him on the wing. But the Raptors in their current situation just cannot have Achiuwa running around out there on the wing. The situation got so dire that out of necessity, Nurse had to go to Christian Koloko as the rim protector against the Thunder yesterday. And Koloko looked very good. And it was a further example of a player who doesn't have an offensive game, who can make a significant role for themselves by playing defense. And the stability that Koloko provided to the bench minutes yesterday was very rewarding for the team. And it's exactly what Achiuwa has not been doing in recent games for the team. But because of Achiuwa's lack of ability to play offense and spread the floor right now, the Raptors have no choice but to use him as the big for their team. You can't really have a situation where Koloko was in the game with Achiuwa and Boucher. Right now, Boucher is in a good stretch of games, so he's going to be playing. Of course, he's going to be coming off the bench. If you have Koloko as the base of your zone defense, and he's not providing much from an offensive standpoint, then you also can't really have Achiuwa, who's not providing anything from an offensive standpoint. Boucher's been spacing the floor decently as well in the last couple of months here. Achiuwa has not been doing that at all. So you can't have Koloko and Achiuwa playing together, but you also can't have Achiuwa in the starting units. That is where the situation has become difficult for the Raptors in getting anything out of Achiuwa, because the reality is the player has been providing nothing for this team as of late. So they have no choice but to put him on the bench and hopefully send a message to the player. And like I said, Koloko looked good, and for the games coming up, 2 big games against the Timberwolves and the Bucks, I think the Raptors should continue to go with Koloko in those spots. He just provides that stability that Precious Achiuwa cannot do. And if these things don't change for Achiuwa, he's going to have trouble maintaining an NBA status because the Raptors bench has been so bad in the last few weeks. I'm not saying it's completely on Achiuwa, but a large part of it is. And the fact that the Raptors have such a bad bench would showcase that, hey, you don't need to do a lot to get minutes for this team. You don't need to do too much. But Achiuwa isn't even doing that. I think that playing him on the inside of the rim clearly is not the best spot for him. In isolation this season on defense, to my surprise, he's actually been pretty good. So getting him more involved in those scenarios could help him reach different heights of his game. But the offensive end is where things need to change as well. He needs to develop that confidence again from a three-point shooting standpoint, because that Denver game, he got no respect whatsoever. They were not guarding him. And the fact he doesn't have that three-point game, like, sure, you can have the interior game, but right now on the inside, the ball IQ is completely gone. We used to have those sort of games where you always have that one precious moment where he makes that brain-dead sort of mistake where he turns it over, takes a bad shot. But we're seeing them almost every time he gets the ball right now. There's no go-to move in the post. When he has the ball in his hands in the mid-range areas, he doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't know whether he should try to score. He doesn't know whether he should pass it. So sometimes he just settles for a mid-range jumper. When Achiuwa shoots mid-range jumpers, it makes you want to throw up because it's such an inefficient, bad shot that should never be taken. But his ball IQ isn't there to understand these things at the moment. And I think the biggest thing comes down to confidence. And I think the confidence starts for him on the defensive end. I think the confidence starts in those areas where if he can be a consistent contributor and help this team on that end of the court, those sort of emotions and feelings of finding success there can also have themselves evoke on him on the offensive end of the court as well. We saw Achiuwa last season as a 36% three-point shooter, a player going toe-to-toe, possession after possession, with Joel Embiid on offense and on defense, and doing a pretty good job at that. Like, Joel Embiid is going to be Joel Embiid and get some ridiculous numbers a lot of the time. But for Achiuwa, he did a great job against a player and held the Raptors to 2 wins in that series despite going down 3-0. I refuse to believe that a player that could do so much for this team for such an extended run from the All-Star break onwards, and even in the biggest games for us in the playoffs, I refuse to believe that is a player who cannot play in the NBA and that cannot be a contributor to this team. I don't know what it is about him that has changed so drastically, but I'm not going to give up on him. I've seen the talent. I'm high on his potential. I'm a lot lower right now, but I'm high on his potential. There have been some very, very good glimpses of the player this season. And I don't want to hear anything about, he's been injured and he's coming back from injury. Since he returned from injury, he had a rough patch right after the injury. Then as he got his feet under him, he was playing really well. He was knocking down threes. He was making an impact on offense. He was making an impact on defense, more importantly. But that's all gone away in the last few weeks here. But we've had so many players go through rough patches. Siakam is in the middle of a rough patch. Maybe yesterday's game against the Thunder, where he had 25, 13, and 8 or something like that. Maybe that helped him bounce back. VanVleet had a really rough start to the season, but in the last few months, like the last 4 months or so, he's been excellent and been a significant contributor to this team. So I have no reason to believe that Achiuwa can't do this as well and can't get out of this rut. All I'm hoping is that Nick Nurse wanted to send a wake-up call to Achiuwa by benching him against the Thunder. I'm hoping it does the trick because there is a talented player here. The Raptors, for the interest of themselves and the interest of the depth that is already very depleted on the team, they need to get the most out of him. But it's on Achiuwa to put in the work to get back to those levels where he's contributing at an NBA level consistently. Once again, things need to change for the player, but I have belief he can snap out of it. What do you guys make of Achiuwa's game? Do you think he's a completely lost cause, or are you with me? Do you think he has that potential still and the Raptors can help him fulfill it? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, because that is it for today's video. Drop a like if you did enjoy, and make sure you subscribe to Amateur Sports for more content just like this. Help me on my road to 14,000 subs, and we'll see you again next time.